Right now, an audio engineering magazine and a home improvement blog are publishing the exact same news story about international tariffs. But if you read them side by side, the audio site breaks down the supply chain for studio microphones, while the DIY blog explains the cost of lumber. The underlying facts are identical, but the text is flawlessly localized to their specific readers. Nobody is plagiarizing anyone. What you're seeing is the output of automated editorial engines operating behind the scenes. These systems pull raw facts from a single source and feed them through a large language model to instantly generate hundreds of customized versions. For the last century, hiring a human editor to rewrite a story for a specific audience was incredibly expensive. Today, that automated rewrite costs less than a cent. That massive drop in cost has completely broken the math that the entire global media industry was built on. The bedrock rule of news distribution for the last 150 years was that everyone published the exact same copy. That era is officially over. To understand why the math broke, we have to look at why it was built in the first place. In 1846, sending a reporter to the front lines of the Mexican-American War cost more than any single New York newspaper could afford. So 5 fierce competitors tried a labor cost trick. They pooled their money to hire one correspondent, split the telegraph bill, and agreed to print the exact same dispatches. That simple arithmetic created the global wire agencies like the Associated Press and Reuters. The economic trade-off was clear. You get affordable, world-class reporting, but you have to run the identical paragraph as everyone else. Now, jump to 2024. The Associated Press has watched its revenue from U.S. newspapers drop from 30% down to just 10%. The model only worked because publishers had no other choice. Once the cost of creating a unique, customized story dropped below the cost of paying for that shared wire feed, the compromise stopped making sense. We can map out the anatomy of global journalism by looking at what we call the news stack. It's built in 3 distinct layers. The top layer is reporting. This is the expensive, physical reality of journalism, the human cost of putting a correspondent on the ground in Kyiv or at a press conference to gather original facts. Below that is the distribution layer. For decades, this was the domain of the wire agencies, taking that one generic story and piping it to thousands of global endpoints. And finally, the differentiation layer at the bottom. If a local editor wanted that global wire story to sound like it was written specifically for their hometown readers, they had to sit down and rewrite it manually. Forcing thousands of newspapers to run the exact same text was a brutal economic limitation. It was the only way to amortize the high cost of reporting across a shared subscriber base. That limitation disappeared the moment large language models entered the stack. An LLM specializes in taking a set of facts and instantly recasting them in any tone or format, entirely wiping out the labor cost of the differentiation layer. This chart shows the exact mathematical inversion taking place. The flat line represents the traditional cost of syndicating an identical wire story. But look at the plunging line. Running a source story through AI to rewrite it costs a fraction of a cent. That's below the cost of not rewriting it. It's cheaper to generate 50 customized versions than to push identical text through your system twice. Instead of taking a single feed, modern editorial engines ingest the raw facts once and fan them out across hundreds of separate publications, seamlessly localized for each audience in a fraction of a second. We have traded forced identical syndication for a system capable of infinite zero-cost customization. But this inversion has triggered chaos across the internet. Search engines, specifically Google, are now aggressively hunting down and penalizing websites that pump out cheap, interchangeable AI paraphrases of the exact same news events. At the same time, major publishers are suing platforms like Perplexity. They allege these AI systems act as direct substitutes for their reporting, scraping content to provide near-verbatim summaries that satisfy the user's query without sending a single click to the original source. Which leaves us with a massive structural paradox. In the wire era, seeing the exact same paragraph in 50 different newspapers was your proof that the reporting was real. Today, because every article is unique, trust relies entirely on a digital hyperlink pointing back to the original journalist. If that attribution link breaks, or if AI companies refuse to make it clear and machine-readable, the entire chain of truth simply disintegrates. This brings us back to the only piece of the news stack that cannot be automated. An AI model can rewrite a dispatch in 1,000 different voices, but it cannot stand in a war zone to witness a drone strike. Historically, the salary for the reporter dodging those strikes was funded by thousands of local papers paying their wire subscriptions. If an aggregator can just license a single raw feed and generate all those local versions with AI, that massive revenue multiplier vanishes. Tech companies are currently signing huge licensing deals, injecting hundreds of millions of dollars into publishing industry. But those deals heavily favor massive, brand-name legacy media corporations, not the not-for-profit wire cooperatives that supply the bulk of the world's ground-level reporting. The lingering question is whether those tech dollars will find their way far enough down the supply chain to actually pay the rent for the field correspondents doing the dangerous work. Because if the transition bankrupts the reporting layer, it won't matter how perfectly customized our information feeds become. They will just be millions of beautifully written paragraphs pointing back to absolutely nothing.